I'm thrilled to be back in Arlington, and especially grateful to be among the next generation of journalists and to be around so many winners. I know that the contest is coming later, but I feel like I'm surrounded by many winners, many of them colleagues of mine for a long time. Before Mexico City, Washington, and stints in Havana, Arlington was the place where I was based. This is where I got my first start with the Dallas Morning News. We were a small bureau and did some great work, covered the construction of the ballpark, the expansion of the city. But this was also a place of a lot of fun. And I think my colleagues would be horrified if I confess this to you, but we actually had yogurt day on Thursdays and red apple sales at Foley's on Fridays. I think I need some water or a tequila. Anybody have any water? I have to admit, I feel very sort of intimidated to be around so many colleagues, and there's a part of me that, thank you. There's a part of me that looks around and thinks, well, let's just go to the bar and have a caminero and talk. I'm excited to be in front of colleagues like Kevin, who's I think up for an award, Stella, Rebecca, Alice, Yasmin. I can just go around the room. And especially George Ketchow, my boss at the Wall Street Journal many years ago in Dallas. Tom Wong, Dave Tarrant, and Jay Root from Mexico, our days in Mexico. I'm grateful that you have asked me to talk about my book, Midnight in Mexico, because it was with SPJ weeks before the book came out that Rebecca had asked me to talk about the launch, and I feel like that she brought me a lot of good luck, so I'm happy to be back. I'm also happy that you've asked me to talk about the importance of freedom of expression in my homeland of Mexico. I also want to talk about the power of storytelling, which is really, I think, the reason we do what we do. Why we go to the lengths and take the risks, especially in Mexico, to tell stories. Whether about the so-called Mexico's moment, the narrative about the growing middle class, stories of energy, telecommunications reform, educational exchange programs, or yes, the other contrasting narrative, the Mexico of violence, fears, kidnappings. The student tragedy in Ayotzinapa, Guerrero, the rise of criminal organizations, and yes, journalists who have been silenced and can no longer share these stories, their freedom of expression having come to an end. Whatever narrative we tell, it's the power of story that inspires us. People often ask me, what is the storyline behind Midnight in Mexico? What's the narrative? Is it about narcos? My response is that the drug war in Mexico is just a backdrop, but the heart and soul of the story is about the universal search for home, a quest for truth, breaking the silence on behalf of so many colleagues forced into the exile of silence. It is about believing in hope, sometimes against all hope, believing in that flickering light during the darkest time of the night, a family story, a love letter, a confession to my mother about our homeland, the tragic beauty of Mexico, a testimony to the most tumultuous, transformative time we have witnessed in our lifetime. It's also a book about a time and a place in Mexico, a place where tens of thousands have been killed or disappeared, and a time when so many media companies decided to self-censor themselves because of lack of government protection or threats. Every 26 hours, according to Periodistas de a Pie in Artículo 19, at least one reporter is attacked, not just by criminal groups, but by the state, elements of the government. Case in point, the news director of a radio station in Oaxaca was killed. Reporters trying to interview the human rights ombudsman in Puebla were physically harassed, kicked out of the office, and in Michoacán, a reporter's car was set on fire. Cops in the city of Torreon physically beat up 2 reporters. This afternoon, I got a call from colleagues in Reynosa who said they were threatened, and they weren't sure whether they were cartel people or members of the government. Again, this did not happen in the last year, or in the last 6 months, or in the last month, or even in the last week. This happened in the last 26 hours. which again begs the question, why do we do what we do? In 1994, the Dallas Morning News sent me to Mexico and made my dream come true. I was born in Mexico, raised in California, San Joaquin Valley, and later along the Texas-Mexico border. But Mexico always reeled me back. Just setting foot in Mexico gave me a sense of purpose. I had covered political changes sweeping northern Mexico, been a witness to Mexicans demanding political change, laying claim to their homeland. It felt to me like a social revolution. I was hooked with this incurable disease called journalism. I wanted to tell the story to see what democracy would mean for Mexico. And the Dallas Morning News offered me a front seat to history. At one point, we had the largest bureau anywhere, 13 people, in competition in San Antonio, Austin, Houston, New Orleans, Phoenix, San Jose, Sacramento. Today, we're down to one, and I'm here in Arlington. We're also the only newspaper, other than the LA Times, from the Southwest. I arrived in Mexico on a December afternoon as a vessel was on a downward spiral and my dreams blossoming. I arrived with my parents' reluctant blessing. My mother promised to pray for me daily, which she still does, and asked for protection from the Virgen de Guadalupe. But she and my dad also made me promise that I would never cover drug traffickers. At the time, we had a small little cafe in El Paso, just 3 blocks from the border. And this one client who we thought really was hooked on my mother's cooking came to my dad one day and said, we'd like to invest. And he talked about something like $100,000, maybe $300,000. I was a student and I thought, well, I'll just give up education. I had already quit high school. That I'll just give up on education and open all these restaurants along the US-Mexico border, Freddy's Cafe. Then the man came back and said, okay, I'm glad you liked the deal, but if anything goes wrong, you cannot go to the cops. And he takes out a list with my brothers, my sisters, their names, and the school they go to. He said, I won't take it out on you, I will take it out on them. My father at the time walked away, and we talked about it, because we had just arrived from California. We really didn't know what we were getting into on the border. But my dad told me, he said, the lesson for me was that los narcos no conocen la palabra perdón. The narcos do not know the meaning of the word forgiveness. So I promised him and my mom that I wouldn't cover this story. And I was fine with making that promise. After all, I had returned to Mexico to write about his possibility, not his defeat, about his hopes and dreams, not his shame. Like many Mexicans, I too thought I could tapar el sol con un dedo, hide the sun, the obvious, with one finger, hide the endemic corruption, the shameful impunity, the weak judicial institutions. But as you may know, with Vicente Fox's 2000 election and the PRI out of the picture, a party that operated more like a machine for 71 years, a power vacuum grew. Power shifted to states. New non-state actors, warlords, took over certain regions, mostly along the border state with Texas. When Felipe Calderón launched his offensive in 2007 to take control of the country, headed for failed state, violence exploded. That's when I had my oh shit moment. Suddenly we were faced with one of the biggest stories in Mexico. And at the time I was one of the reporters who wanted to cover anything but drug traffickers. Then we were short-staffed. I had no choice. That story was the emergence of the Zetas paramilitary group, former elite members, some trained by the US government, who deserted their base and went to work for the top leaders of a criminal group. The Zetas became the game changers. They used horrific violence not just to instill fear among rivals, but to paralyze entire communities. They changed the dynamics of organized crime. Entire communities, regions fell into their hands. This includes local mayor's offices, police departments, and newsrooms. I remember standing in front of City Hall in Nuevo Laredo, Mexico, and seeing these thugs with AR-15s, rocket grenade launchers, 50 caliber machine guns, and wondering where exactly was the government. But these criminals did not just pose the biggest national security threat to Mexico, they also had ties throughout Texas. Their home base is Dallas. One of them, Miguel Ángel Treviño Morales, known as 40, came of age as a criminal in North Texas. And I remember one night, I was talking to a top U.S. source, and he kept telling me, you guys have to care about this story. This is 2005. Not many people were really covering what was going on at the time. And we were already thinking more and more in terms of regional, what made sense as a regional newspaper. And I told the guy, I said, well, maybe you should try to reach out to other national papers. Comes up to me as I'm getting in the car, he says, the top leader is in Dallas. That's where his family is. That's where he came of age. From that moment on, we began to cover every aspect of the Zetas. How 40 became one of the most brutal killers in Mexico's history. He would ride around with 200 bodyguards, millions in cash, sleeping in his truck, or traveling by low-flying plane, or ambulances. He dominated entire states, regions of Mexico with just a mere mention of his name or his stare. One of his nicknames is Muerte, death. And this is I'll give you a quick read from the book, Midnight in Mexico. This is 2007. I had been covering drug traffickers now for about 3 years. And the book begins this way. I walked into the balcony of my 6th-floor apartment in my neighborhood of La Condesa and fixated on the thin sheets of rain falling on a summer afternoon. In the center of a roundabout on the street below, theater students rehearsed their lines. A young valet parking cars for tips, dressed in a gray hooded pullover and tan jeans, struggled to light a cigarette. In the corner, the actress moved gracefully around a pale blue fountain that, usually dry, was now filling with rainwater. Somewhere in the distance, the sound of the stream whistle of El Camotero, the man selling roasted sugar sweet potatoes, pierced the wet air. Inside my apartment, the eagle sang through the speakers, welcome me to the Hotel California. My girlfriend of more than a decade, Angela Corchado, and a friend were chatting over Malbec and tequila before we were to head out for dinner with some journalist colleagues. A tall vase of calla lilies sitting on a table between them reminded me of Diego Rivera's timeless frescoes of indigenous women gathering flowers into their arms. My cell phone vibrated in my jean pocket. I hesitated. It was bound to be work. But I didn't want to miss a tip, a potential tip. I set my tequila down and flipped the phone open. It was July 2007, the last time I felt safe in Mexico. I recognized a low-pitched voice on the other end, a longtime trusted source, a U.S. investigator with informants inside some of the most brutal drug cartels in Mexico. I grabbed a pen and notepad and slipped into my bedroom. I closed the door. The skyline was still visible through the windows. It was dusk. I spoke a secret code name and joked, "Hey, ¿qué onda, güey? What's up?" He got to the point. "Where are you?" "In Mexico." "Where exactly?" "In my apartment." "Why?" "They plan to kill an American journalist within 24 hours. 3 names came up. I think it's you." I get out. "What? Who are they?" "I can't tell you more because I don't know more. But this may be serious. Set this business." I think I'll pause and have a shot of tequila. That was July 2007. I felt the ground under me collapse, my legs weakened, the life in me sucked away. I felt betrayed. I had always wanted to believe that I was a son of Mexico, and now somehow someone wanted to kill me. I was scared shitless. I had once asked the same source about the likelihood that an American journalist would be targeted by a cartel. He said he had good news and bad news. The good news, a Mexican cartel does not want to harm an American journalist. It would bring way too much attention to their estimated $30 billion to $40 billion industry. The consequences could be too messy for them. The bad news, you don't look American, bro. And I tell you this story because I want to make something very clear. I am by no means more courageous or braver than any of my Mexican colleagues. I just want to believe that if something happens to me, someone, somewhere, someone in this room will seek justice. That I won't be just another number. Because as bad as my situation may sound, the danger I face really pales in comparison to what my colleagues in Mexico confront. If there's one takeaway I want you to take with you this evening, is the one that I grapple with every day. I believe I am alive today simply because I am an American journalist, and cartels fear the wrath of the US government. My colleagues in Mexico, many of whom have been threatened, we often sit around over mezcal or tequila, and we talk about that Mexico is the only country we know where if you receive a death threat and you live through a death threat, you somehow have to justify why you are still alive. Mexico, as I mentioned earlier, is one of the most dangerous places to practice journalism. These days, I walk in the shadow of more than 120,000 people killed or disappear in just over 8 years. Among them, dozens of Mexican colleagues. Drug traffickers bully reporters, harassing them if they're lucky, or silencing them for good. This evening, I speak to you in the memory of more than 50. Some organizations put the number closer to 100. Journalists who have either been killed or disappeared since Mexico's political change began in 2000. And we cannot forget the hundreds of clandestine graves with remains of Central Americans, or the hundreds of Mexicans found in unmarked graves in states like Coahuila, Nuevo León, Tamaulipas, Durango, Zacatecas, and many more regions. These days, cartels are fragmented, but more dangerous. The number of groups has increased from a handful, something like 4 or 5 when I started covering them back in the mid-2000s, to more than 70 today. They are no longer just drug cartels, but criminal organizations. They're into the business of the kidnappings, extortions, and the control of routes headed for the United States, transporting everything from illicit drugs to human beings. Today, there are regions in Mexico where reporters have elected to censor themselves. In other words, see nothing, say nothing. Recently, I was in Nuevo Laredo working on a story about energy reform and the opportunities ahead for Mexico and Texas. Then I was told by US sources that 4 to 5 people are being kidnapped daily in Nuevo Laredo, that there are gunfights at night, more than 50 people killed in the span of a few hours. No reporting whatsoever. When I returned 3 weeks ago, Cuarenta's brother, Miguel Ángel Treviño Morales, his brother Omar, had also been captured and replaced quickly by his older brother, both with long roots in Dallas. Obviously, we wrote the story, yet in Nuevo Laredo, no radio, TV, or newspaper mentioned the news. In fact, this is how bad the situation is. That week, reporters had to call the Zetas and the spokesman for permission to run something, a mention, even wired news originating from Mexico City. The Zetas said no. Today, fear has morphed into silence and now apathy. The situation has evolved from saying they are openly self-censoring themselves to we just don't care anymore. Many have simply given up. Many of my colleagues are saying this is not worth it. And who can question the logic of my Mexican colleagues when the vast majority of those cases remain unsolved? Because Mexico's rule of law remains so weak, institutions virtually non-existent, crimes go unpunished. Less than 5% of all homicides in Mexico are solved. Just as outrageous in Mexico, they kill you twice. Once with a bullet, a blow to the head, or in a barrel of acid, and then they kill you again, character assassinations, spreading rumors about you. And even in Mexico City, where we thought journalists like Carmen Aristegui were untouchable, it appears now that we were wrong. Arguably the most powerful journalist in Mexico, Aristegui and her team uncover, among other big stories, that the president and his wife had purchased a $7.1 million home from a government contractor. A few weeks ago, the team organized a website for whistleblowers, and the radio company fired them for using a company logo. Aristegui is now fighting back through legal channels. With journalism in trouble, colleagues and citizens in general are increasingly turning to social media, and that is proving to be an effective tool. Hashtags of Ayotzinapa, Ya me cansé, or En defensa de Aristegui have proven to be effective. Yet what's more important isn't so much the hashtag, because let's face it, hashtags last days and then they go on, or users go on to the next best thing. What's important is that the pressure is coming from outside, that Mexico's little secret is out for the world to see. Last December, I interviewed relatives of one of the missing students of Ayotzinapa. One was a father who once worked in Dallas taking care of horses. Another one is a gardener. When I asked, what do you want Americans or Texans to know, or what do you want them to do, they responded with the same answer. We want Americans, we want Texans to care, share our pain, and to pressure our authorities because we can't do this alone. We want justice, we want accountability. When I asked the cab driver, what does Mexico need to do to get ahead, he pulled what I first feared was a gun from his glove compartment. It turned out to be a smartphone. And he said, we need to learn as Mexicans not just to blame the authorities, but to shame them. Yes, you can try to change the narrative all you want, as the current administration is trying to do, but as President Ernesto Zedillo, who is now a Yale professor and governed Mexico from '94 to 2000, said during a recent trip to Mexico City, it's lamentable that in Mexico you still have no rule of law, that the killings go unsolved, whether a journalist or anyone. Indeed, Mexico's moment is in need of strong judicial institutions, checks and balances. Otherwise, forget all the reforms, the economic forecast. Without a rule of law, you're building a nation in quicksand and surrounded by a bunch of mass graves. Still, as bad as things are in Mexico, I remain hopeful about the future. As reporters, one of the biggest challenges we face is not to define a country simply by its violence, but by its people. I'm inspired because over a year, journalists like Marcela Turati, Elia Baltazar, Daniela Pastrana, and hundreds more went all out to share Mexico's pain with the world. They made sure that colleagues like Gregorio Jimenez of Veracruz did not end up as just another number, another dead journalist. They put a name in a face and made sure that Veracruz, where more than 10 journalists have been killed in just 6 years, that the entire world, for that matter, remember Gregorio, Moises Sanchez, and Regina Martinez. They made sure that their deaths are a turning point. Of course, we face our own challenges when it comes to freedom of expression in the United States. Yesterday, and this goes back to Alice's point, yesterday I was in a place called Anapra, Chihuahua, right across the border from El Paso. And I was looking for ISIS. So it may sound kind of funny, but there was an article posted by Judicial Watch, a conservative watchdog in Washington. And these days, just about anyone can try to claim or call themselves a journalist. So they run this piece that says ISIS is right across the border in Juarez. And I called my editor, I said, well, we got to look into it. It's getting a lot of play, there's a lot of social media, there's been some articles written about this, been some radio interviews. So I go across into Anapra, and Anapra is a little town of about 200 people or so. And I thought, if ISIS is here, it's not going to be hard to find them. So I finally got a call back from the investigator at Judicial Watch. And I said, listen, I'm here in Anapra, and you guys were pretty clear about where these guys are. Can you give me an address? Maybe I can just knock on some doors and find out. And the guy said, well, that's kind of like looking for the mayor in New York City. It's a big place. It's going to be very difficult. I said, no, New York City is millions of people, very diverse. This is Anapra, less than 200 people. Everybody speaks Spanish. I think everybody's Mexican. Help me out here. And I said, do you even speak Spanish? Did you even visit Anapra? Because you're scaring the heck out of people. I mean, there's more than 2 million people in Ciudad Juarez, El Paso, Las Cruces, that whole region. So people are scared that ISIS is here and they're about to bomb the United States or behead someone. And I kept peppering with questions, and he finally hung up on me. I mean, before he hung up, he said, call me when you have real questions. I ended up spending the whole day. The Mexicans I interviewed thought it was much more humorous. that ISIS was there. But the story's going to run sometime this weekend. I'm giving a shameless plug to the Dallas Morning News.
Okay.
But that's my ISIS story. I mean, I can't think of a more important time to try, as journalists, to try to hold people accountable at a time of social media, at a time of so much noise. I'll end by trying to answer the question of why we do what we do, which is also my mother's favorite question. Why do I continue to live in Mexico and report on these stories? Why do I risk my life and know, I tell her and I tell you, I don't have a death wish. No color, no story is worth anyone's life. There's no adrenaline. Deep down, my mother knows that there's more personal reasons for me to stay in Mexico. She understands that I am not complete unless I'm telling stories with one foot in two countries. Even though who I am and what I represent, the native and the outsider, is often met with as much rejection in Mexico as it is in the United States. I have spent years trying to shake the feeling that I am hopelessly American in Mexico and Mexican in America. Never fully Mexican, never fully American, often feeling less than one, sometimes more than two, depending on the moment. It is in that search for home and the story and fusion of two worlds that I always find the sweet spot of who I am and who we are. I tell stories because I believe in our responsibility, especially as journalists with more protection, to share stories so that the death, the human rights abuses, the disappear, and the defenseless are never forgotten. Because stories make a difference. Stories humanize. Stories empower and can shine the light. And I'll end with one example. 2 summers ago, I'm sitting with the editor of Random House in Español. We're sitting in this place, and it's a neighborhood called Polanco. And my phone keeps vibrating, going off and off, and I'm ignoring it. I'm thinking, I'm about to get the book is about to be published in Spanish. The last thing I want to do is be disrespectful. After 10 times, I finally say, you know what, I'm going to go to the bathroom, check this out. And there's a message from a source who says, 40, Miguel Ángel Treviño Morales, the leader of the Zetas, was captured this morning. This is about 3:30 in the afternoon. He says he's been captured, I think it was 2:30 in the morning. And no one has made this official, no one has made this public. He says, you have to try to write something. And for a while, I kind of mulled the idea, and I kept asking myself, do I want to open all wounds again? Do I want to rattle the feathers of the man who put a hit on my source and later try to go after the messenger, me? And I started making phone calls. I said, first of all, how can you prove this? And he says, I just did. He said, hang up and look at your messages. Hung up, opened my message. There's a picture of 40 surrounded by Navy people. And suddenly I feel like, okay, I mean, there's not much I can do about this. I'm going to have to try to do something. I called my editors in Dallas, and I said, I started calling people on both sides of the border, trying to confirm. I finally reached 3 sources. Called my editor, I said, 40's been captured, and we have to break something. I think this story is gonna go viral. I get a call from my editor at the time, George Rodriguez, one of my editors, managing editor. He says, Freddie, are you sure you want to do this? You've been doing this for over 25 years. You have 3 unidentified sources, 3 anonymous sources. How comfortable are you? You might be throwing 25 years of your career. And I said, I feel pretty comfortable. He says, okay, we're going with this. So between Polanco and La Condesa, I start typing on my BlackBerry. And we sent the story to Dallas. The story goes up. And within seconds, everything just kind of changes. Right before I sent the story, I called the Mexican government. And I said, can you confirm or deny that 40 was captured? He says, we know nothing about that. Right after the story goes up, I get a call from the government. It says, there's a press conference tonight. I say, is it about 40? He says, there's a press conference tonight. You may want to be there. That night, I got a tweet from one woman in Mexico, and her words have always resonated with me. She said, "Esta noche moviste a México." This evening, you have moved Mexico. The message was clear, reinforced, underscored. Truth, stories still matter. Truth is our best defense. Truth is our most important protection. True storytelling is our best weapon. Thank you very much.